Jake Rodriguez never thought he'd be running for his life through the streets of New Kepler Station. But here he was, gasping for air as his worn-out sneakers slapped against the metal walkways of the space station's marketplace. Behind him, he could hear the heavy footsteps of the debt collectors getting closer. It all started 3 months ago when Jake made the worst financial decision of his life. He had borrowed 50,000 credits from the Galactic Loan Company to start a FIO, small shipping business. The plan seemed foolproof at the time. Buy a cargo ship, transport goods between planets, make easy money. What could go wrong? Everything went wrong. His ship broke down during the first delivery. The repair costs ate up most of his remaining money. Then pirates attacked his second shipment, stealing everything valuable. By the third week, Jake realized he was in serious trouble. The loan payments were due, and he had barely enough credits to buy food. The Galactic Loan Company wasn't known for their patience. When Jake missed his first payment, they sent polite reminder messages. When he missed the second payment, the messages became less polite. By the time he missed the third payment, they stopped sending messages altogether and sent something much worse instead. The Reapers. These weren't your typical debt collectors. The Reapers were enhanced humans with cybernetic implants that made them faster, stronger, and nearly impossible to lose in a chase. They wore all black uniforms and had a reputation for always getting their money, one way or another. Jake had heard stories about people who couldn't pay their debts. Those people usually ended up working in the deep space mining colonies for years, paying off their loans through forced labor. Jake had been running from them for 2 weeks now, jumping from planet to planet, staying in cheap hotels and eating nothing but instant noodles. But the Reapers were persistent. They had resources, technology, and most importantly, they had time. Jake was just one human trying to stay ahead of a well-funded organization that specialized in hunting people down. This morning, Jake had made a crucial mistake. He had used his real identity card to buy a cup of coffee at a space station cafe. Within an hour, the Reapers had tracked the transaction and arrived at New Kepler Station. Jake barely had time to grab his small backpack before he saw their black ship docking at the station's main port. Now he was running through the crowded marketplace, pushing past alien tourists and human merchants. The marketplace was huge, stretching across 3 levels of the space station. Vendors sold everything from exotic fruits grown on distant planets to high-tech gadgets that Jake couldn't even identify. The air was filled with the sounds of dozens of different languages and the smells of cooking food from various worlds. Jake ducked behind a stall selling colorful fabrics from the Andromeda system. He peeked around the corner and saw them. 3 Reapers in their signature black uniforms scanning the crowd with their enhanced eyes. One of them was speaking into a communication device, probably coordinating with more agents throughout the station. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Sweat dripped down his face despite the station's climate control system. Jake knew he couldn't keep running forever. The space station was big, but it wasn't infinite. Eventually, they would corner him. That's when he spotted the narrow alley between 2 residential buildings. It was barely wide enough for one person, and it led away from the main marketplace. Without thinking, Jake sprinted toward it, hoping. The Reapers hadn't seen him. The alley was darker than the marketplace, lit only by a few flickering lights. Jake could hear his footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Behind him, he heard shouting. The Reapers had spotted him. Jake ran faster than he had ever run in his life. His lungs burned, and his legs felt like they were made of rubber. But he kept going because the alternative was too scary to think about. He could hear the Reapers getting closer, their heavy boots creating a rhythm of doom behind him. The alley curved to the right, and Jake found himself in a small area between several buildings. Steam was pouring out of vents in the walls, making it hard to see clearly. The air smelled like cleaning chemicals and something else he couldn't identify. Through the steam, Jake saw a building with large windows fogged up from the inside. It looked like some kind of industrial facility, maybe a laundry or cleaning service. More importantly, he noticed that one of the side doors was slightly open. Jake didn't have time to think about whether this was a good idea or not. The sound of the Reapers' footsteps was getting louder, and he could hear them talking to each other in their cold, professional voices. In a few seconds, they would turn the corner and see him. He slipped through the partially open door and found himself inside what was definitely a laundry facility. The room was filled with massive washing machines and dryers that were much larger than anything designed for humans. Mountains of clean clothes and linens were piled everywhere, waiting to be folded and sorted. Without hesitation, Jake dove behind the largest pile of laundry he could find. The fabric was incredibly soft and smelled like flowers and ocean breeze. He buried himself deep in the pile, making sure no part of his body was visible, just in time. He heard the Reapers' voices right outside the building, getting closer to where he was hiding. Jake held his breath and prayed they wouldn't think to check inside the laundry facility. The voices grew louder, then gradually faded as the Reapers continued their search elsewhere. Jake remained perfectly still, not daring to move even slightly. He was safe for now, but he had no idea what kind of place he had stumbled into or who might discover him next. Jake lay perfectly still beneath what felt like the softest blankets he had ever touched. His heart was still racing from the chase, and every muscle in his body was tense with fear. The fabric around him smelled amazing, like spring flowers, mixed with clean mountain air. It was so different from the recycled air and industrial smells he was used to on space stations. Minutes passed, and the voices of the Reapers grew more distant. Jake could hear them checking other buildings in the area, their heavy boots echoing through the narrow alleys. He forced himself to breathe slowly and quietly, even though his lungs wanted to gasp for air after running so hard. That's when he heard something that made him freeze completely. Voices were coming from inside the laundry facility. But these weren't human voices. They had a musical quality to them, with sounds and tones that Jake had never heard before. The language was completely unfamiliar, but somehow it sounded beautiful and calming. Jake carefully shifted his position, trying to get a better view without revealing himself. Through a small gap in the pile of laundry, he could see movement across the room. What he saw made his eyes go wide with amazement and terror. 3 enormous figures were working around the laundry facility, folding clothes and organizing equipment. They were clearly female, but they were unlike any humans Jake had ever seen. These beings stood at least 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and muscles that would make professional bodybuilders jealous. Their skin had a subtle blue tint that seemed to shimmer under the facility's lights. Jake recognized them from stories he had heard in spaceport bars. These were Valorians, members of an all-female warrior species from the outer rim of the galaxy. Valorians were legendary throughout known space for their incredible strength and fighting abilities. They served as peacekeepers, military officers, and bodyguards for important officials. Jake had never seen one in person, and he certainly had never expected to be hiding in their laundry room. The 3 Valorians moved with surprising grace for beings their size. They were dressed in casual clothes that looked incredibly comfortable, but did nothing to hide their impressive physiques. Each of them had intricate tattoos covering their arms and necks, patterns that seemed to tell stories Jake couldn't understand. The tallest of the 3 had silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She appeared to be the leader of the group, giving quiet instructions to the others as they worked. The second Valorian had bright red hair and a noticeable scar running across her left cheek, probably from some past battle. The third had blonde hair and arms so muscular that Jake was pretty sure she could lift his entire body with one hand. What surprised Jake most was how normal their conversation sounded, despite being in an alien language. They seemed to be discussing everyday things just like any group of friends doing chores together. Occasionally, one of them would laugh at something another said, and the sound was surprisingly pleasant and warm. Jake watched as the silver-haired leader held up what looked like a workout shirt that could have been used as a tent for a small camping trip. She examined it carefully, then said something that made the other 2 nod in agreement. They seemed to be discussing the best way to fold it. The red-haired Valorian was working with what appeared to be their exercise equipment covers. She handled the massive pieces of fabric like they weighed nothing, folding them into neat stacks with practiced efficiency. Every now and then she would pause to flex her shoulders, probably working out some tension from whatever activities they had been doing earlier. The blonde Valorian was organizing their cleaning supplies, which came in containers that were much larger than anything Jake had ever seen. She was apparently very particular about how everything should be arranged, moving bottles and containers around until they were positioned exactly where she wanted them. As Jake continued to watch, he began to realize that these fearsome warriors were actually quite domestic when they were off duty. They cared about having clean clothes and organized living spaces, just like anyone else. The only difference was that everything in their world was sized for beings who could probably bench press a small spacecraft. The conversation between the three Valorians continued, and Jake found himself getting drowsy despite his dangerous situation. The combination of exhaustion from running, the comfort of the soft laundry around him, and the surprisingly soothing sound of their voices was making it hard to stay alert. But Jake knew he couldn't fall asleep. If these Valorians discovered him, the consequences could be much worse than anything the Reapers might do. Valorians were known for their strong sense of honor and justice, but they were also known for their quick tempers when dealing with people who violated their trust or invaded their privacy. Jake tried to imagine what he would say if they found him. How do you explain to three incredibly strong alien warriors that you're hiding in their laundry because you made some bad financial decisions? It sounded ridiculous even in his own head. Time seemed to move very slowly as Jake remained hidden. The Valorians continued their work, occasionally switching to what sounded like standard galactic language when discussing technical aspects of their equipment. Their accents were thick but understandable, which gave Jake hope that he might be able to communicate with them if necessary. The silver-haired leader seemed to be the most talkative, often explaining things to the other two or asking their opinions about various matters. The red-haired one appeared to be more serious, focused intently on her tasks and speaking only when necessary. The blonde seemed to be the most cheerful of the group, often making comments that caused the others to smile or chuckle. Jake realized he was learning more about Valorian culture in these few hours than most humans learned in a lifetime. These weren't just mindless warriors, as some stories suggested. They were intelligent, organized individuals who cared about their living environment and maintained strong friendships with each other. But as fascinating as this discovery was, Jake knew his situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute. The longer he stayed hidden, the more likely it was that one of them would discover him. And when that happened, he would have to face the consequences of invading their private space. Jake thought he might actually make it out of this situation undetected. The three Valorian warriors had been working for what felt like hours, and he had managed to stay perfectly hidden beneath their laundry. His legs were starting to cramp from staying in the same position for so long, but he didn't dare move even slightly. The silver-haired leader had just announced something to the other two in their musical language. From her tone, it sounded like they were getting ready to take a break. Jake felt a surge of hope. If they left the facility for lunch, he could finally escape and find a better hiding place somewhere else on the station. But fate had other plans. The blonde Valorian, who had been organizing cleaning supplies on the other side of the room, walked directly toward Jake's hiding spot. She was looking for something specific, muttering to herself in what sounded like frustration. Jake's heart started pounding so hard he was sure the sound would give him away. She stopped right next to the pile of laundry where Jake was hidden and started examining the different stacks of clothes. Her massive hand hovered just inches above Jake's head as she searched through the various items. Jake closed his eyes and tried to make himself as small as possible. Then disaster struck. The Valorian reached for the exact section of laundry that Jake was using as cover. Her enormous hand closed around his ankle before he even realized what was happening. Jake felt himself being lifted into the air like he weighed nothing at all. "By the stars of Valoria," the blonde warrior shouted in heavily accented standard galactic language. The surprise in her voice was obvious, and Jake found himself dangling upside down, face to face with three very confused and rapidly becoming very angry alien women. The silver-haired leader and the red-haired warrior immediately dropped what they were doing and rushed over to see what their companion had discovered. All three Valorians stared at Jake like he was some kind of strange creature they had never seen before. Jake tried to speak, but found that being held upside down made it very difficult to form coherent words. All that came out was a series of squeaks and gasps. The blonde Valorian adjusted her grip, holding him at arm's length so she could get a better look at him. "It's a human," the red-haired warrior said, stating the obvious with the kind of tone people use when they find something. completely unexpected and not particularly welcome. The silver-haired leader stepped forward and examined Jake more closely. Her eyes were a striking shade of purple, and they seemed to look right through him. When she spoke, her voice carried the kind of authority that made it clear she was used to being in charge. Human male, approximately 25 standard years, old signs of recent physical exertion and stress, she said, as if she were filing an official report. Question is, what is he doing hiding in our private laundry facility? Jake finally managed to find his voice, though it came out much higher pitched than usual. Please don't hurt me, he squeaked. I can explain everything. I'm not a spy or a thief or anything like that. I was just trying to hide from some very bad people who want to hurt me. The three Valorians exchanged glances and started speaking rapidly in their own language. Jake couldn't understand what they were saying, but their tone suggested they were debating what to do with him. The red-haired one sounded like she wanted to take immediate action, while the blonde seemed more curious than angry. The silver-haired leader listened to both of them before making what appeared to be a decision. Set him down, but don't let him escape, she ordered the blonde warrior, who gently placed Jake on his feet but kept one massive hand firmly planted on his shoulder. Jake looked up at the three imposing figures surrounding him and tried to think of the best way to explain his situation without making things worse. These were professional warriors, probably military officers, and they had caught him trespassing in their private space. This was not going to be an easy conversation. Start talking, the silver-haired leader commanded, and make it good. We don't appreciate uninvited guests in our personal areas. Jake took a deep breath and began to tell his story. He explained about his failed business venture, the loan from the Galactic Loan Company, and how everything had gone wrong from the very beginning. He described the Reapers and their reputation for dragging people away to work in mining colonies if they couldn't pay their debts. I know this looks really bad, Jake said, gesturing around the laundry facility. I know I shouldn't be here, and I'm really sorry for invading your privacy, but those debt collectors were right behind me, and this was the only place I could find to hide. I wasn't trying to spy on you or steal anything. I was just scared and desperate. The three Valorians listened to his explanation without interrupting. Their expressions remained neutral, giving Jake no indication of what they were thinking. When he finished talking, they started another conversation in their own language, this one longer and more detailed than the first. The red-haired warrior seemed to be arguing for one course of action, while the blonde appeared to be suggesting something else. The silver-haired leader asked questions and listened to both sides before responding. Jake stood there feeling helpless and terrified, knowing that his fate was being decided in a language he couldn't understand. Finally, the leader turned back to Jake and studied his face carefully. You say you owe money to the Galactic Loan Company, she said slowly. How much money are we talking about? 50,000 credits, Jake admitted, knowing how enormous that amount sounded to someone like him who had never had much money. The three Valorians looked at each other again. The blonde warrior made a comment that caused the red-haired one to snort with what might have been amusement. The leader shook her head but seemed to be fighting back a smile. 50,000 credits, she repeated. That's what humans consider a large debt these days. Jake didn't know how to respond to that. To him, 50,000 credits was more money than he could imagine paying back in his lifetime. But apparently, to these Valorian warriors, it wasn't such an impossible amount. The leader made a decision and stepped closer to Jake. Even though she wasn't trying to intimidate him, her size and presence made him feel very small and vulnerable. Human, she said, and Jake realized he should probably tell them his name. Jake Rodriguez, he said quickly. Jake Rodriguez, she repeated, testing out the pronunciation. I am Commander Zara of the Valorian Peacekeeping Force. This is Lieutenant Vera, she indicated the red-haired warrior, and Sergeant Kaya, pointing to the blonde. Jake nodded respectfully, not sure if he should try to shake hands or bow or what the proper protocol was when meeting alien military officers. We are going to have a conversation about your situation, Commander Zara continued. But first, you need to understand something very important. You have seen us in our off-duty time, in our private living space. This is a serious matter that we cannot simply ignore. Jake stood there waiting for Commander Zara to decide his fate. The three Valorian warriors were having another conversation in their own language, and from their serious expressions, Jake could tell they were discussing something important. He tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking, and his mouth felt completely dry. Lieutenant Vera, the red-haired warrior with the scar, kept glancing at Jake with what looked like suspicion. She spoke in short, sharp sentences that sounded like military commands. Sergeant Kaya, the blonde one who had discovered him, seemed more curious than angry. She asked several questions and gestured toward Jake while she talked. Commander Zara listened to both of her companions before responding. Her voice was steady and thoughtful, like someone carefully weighing all the options before making an important decision. Finally, she turned back to Jake, and he braced himself for whatever was coming next. "Jake Rodriguez," she said, "we have discussed your situation, and we have reached a conclusion that may surprise you." Jake's heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. "Whatever you decide, I understand," he said quietly. "I know I shouldn't have been hiding here." Commander Zara held up one massive hand to silence him. "The Galactic Loan Company," she said, and her voice suddenly became much colder, "is an organization that we know very well. They are parasites who prey on desperate people throughout the galaxy." Jake blinked in surprise. This wasn't what he had expected her to say at all. Lieutenant Vera stepped forward, and Jake could see anger building in her purple eyes. 30 years ago, she said in her accented standard language, "the Galactic Loan Company tried to steal our homeworld. They claimed our people owed them money for mining equipment we never received." Sergeant Kaya nodded grimly. "They sent their reapers to our planet, demanding payment for debts that didn't exist. They wanted to take our children to work in their mining colonies." Commander Zara's expression became fierce. "That was a mistake they only made once. When the reapers landed on Valoria, our people taught them why it's unwise to threaten a warrior culture. No reaper has set foot on our homeworld since then." Jake stared at the three warriors in amazement. He had never heard this story before, but it explained why they seemed to understand his fear of the debt collectors. These women had personal experience with the same organization that was hunting him. "However," Commander Zara continued, "your situation creates a problem for us. You have seen us in our private time, in our personal living space. This is a serious breach of protocol for members of the Valorian peacekeeping force." Jake's hope began to fade. Just because they didn't like the Galactic Loan Company didn't mean they were going to help him. "We cannot simply let you leave and pretend this never happened," Lieutenant Vera added. "If our superiors learned that we allowed a civilian to infiltrate our quarters without consequences, it could affect our military careers. But," Sergeant Kaya said with a slight smile, "we also cannot in good conscience hand you over to the Reapers, knowing what kind of organization they represent." Commander Zara stepped closer to Jake, and even though she wasn't trying to intimidate him, her presence was still overwhelming. "We have a proposal for you, Jake Rodriguez. It's not a perfect solution, but it might help both you and us." Jake looked up at her hopefully. "What kind of proposal?" "You will work for us," she said simply. "We are currently on extended shore leave while our ship undergoes repairs. We need someone to help us with various tasks around our temporary quarters and assist with our equipment maintenance." Lieutenant Vera crossed her arms. "In exchange, we will provide you with food, shelter, and protection from the Reapers while we help you find a legal solution to your debt problem. We have connections throughout the galaxy," Sergeant Kaya explained. "Military personnel, government officials, financial advisors. Someone in our network might be able to help you negotiate better terms with the Galactic Loan Company." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. These incredible warriors were offering to help him, even though he had invaded their privacy and put them in a difficult position. "But," Commander Zara said, and her voice became very serious, "if you agree to this arrangement, you must understand the conditions. You will work hard every day. You will follow our instructions without question. You will respect our culture and our customs. And most importantly, you will never betray our trust. If you try to run away or take advantage of our generosity," Lieutenant Vera added with a fierce look, "we will personally deliver you to the Reapers ourselves. And we will make sure they know exactly where to find you." Jake felt a chill run down his spine at the threat. But he also felt something else: hope. For the first time in months, someone was offering him a chance to solve his problems through honest work instead of running and hiding. "I accept," he said immediately. "I'll work as hard as you need me to. I won't let you down." Commander Zara studied his face carefully, as if trying to determine whether he was being sincere. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. But before we finalize this agreement, you need to understand what you're getting yourself into." She gestured around the laundry facility. "This is just one small part of our living quarters. We have training equipment that weighs more than most humans can lift. We have weapons that require special handling. We have cultural practices that might seem strange to you. We wake up before dawn for physical training," Lieutenant Vera said. "We expect our living spaces to be kept in perfect order at all times. We don't tolerate laziness or excuses. And," Sergeant Kaya added with a grin, "we eat a lot of food. Maintaining our physical condition requires proper nutrition, which means you'll be helping us prepare meals for 3 warriors who can each eat more in one sitting than most humans eat in a day." Jake nodded eagerly. After weeks of living on instant noodles and whatever cheap food he could find, the idea of regular meals sounded like paradise. Commander Zara extended her hand and Jake reached up to shake it. Her grip was firm but careful, as if she was making an effort not to crush his much smaller hand. "Welcome to your new life, Jake Rodriguez," she said. "I hope you're ready to work harder than you've ever worked before." Jake looked up at the 3 imposing figures surrounding him and realized that his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. But for the first time since his business had failed, he felt like he might actually have a future worth looking forward to. 8 months later, Jake Rodriguez stood in front of the mirror in his small but comfortable room and barely recognized the person looking back at him. The scared, desperate man who had hidden in that pile of laundry was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, more confident, and genuinely happy for the first time in years. Working with the 3 Valorian warriors had transformed every aspect of Jake's life. His daily routine now started at 5 in the morning with physical training, alongside Commander Zara, Lieutenant Vera, and Sergeant Kaya. At first, he could barely keep up with their warm-up exercises. The Valorians had been patient with him, creating a special training program designed for human capabilities. "Small steps lead to big changes," Commander Zara had told him during his first week, when he had collapsed after trying to lift weights that were clearly too heavy for him. Even the mightiest Valorian warrior started as a weak child who had to learn and grow. The physical transformation had been dramatic, but the mental changes were even more important. Jake had learned discipline, responsibility, and the satisfaction that comes from honest work. Every morning he helped maintain their training equipment. Every afternoon he assisted with meal preparation, which had taught him cooking skills he never knew he wanted. Every evening, he helped organize their quarters and learned about Valorian culture and traditions. The 3 warriors had become more than employers. They had become his teachers, his protectors, and most surprisingly, his friends. Lieutenant Vera, despite her serious exterior, had a dry sense of humor that often made Jake laugh during their work sessions. She had taught him how to repair and maintain complex equipment, skills that had proven valuable in unexpected ways. Sergeant Kaya was the most talkative of the 3, always ready to share stories about her adventures throughout the galaxy. She had taught Jake basic self-defense techniques and helped him build the physical strength he had never possessed before. More importantly, she had taught him that being strong wasn't just about muscles, but about having the courage to face problems instead of running from them. Commander Zara had been the most influential of all. She had taught Jake about leadership, honor, and the importance of keeping promises. Under her guidance, Jake had learned to organize his thoughts, make plans, and follow through on his commitments. She had also been instrumental in helping him deal with his debt situation. The breakthrough had come during Jake's 3rd month with the Valorians. Commander Zara had used her military connections to arrange a meeting with a financial advisor who specialized in dealing with predatory lending practices. The advisor had reviewed Jake's case and discovered several irregularities in the Galactic Loan Company's paperwork. "They charged you illegal fees," the advisor had explained during their video conference. "They also applied interest rates that exceed galactic commerce regulations. This isn't uncommon with the Galactic Loan Company, but most people don't know their rights or have the resources to fight back. With the advisor's help and the Valorians' support, Jake had been able to negotiate a settlement with the Galactic Loan Company. Instead of owing 50,000 credits at outrageous interest rates, he would pay back 30,000 credits over 5 years at a reasonable rate. More importantly, the Reapers would no longer be hunting him. But the real victory had come when Jake found legitimate employment. Commander Zara had recommended him for a position with the new Kepler Station Logistics Department, where his newly developed organizational skills and work ethic quickly impressed his supervisors. Within 3 months, he had been promoted twice, and was earning enough money to make his loan payments comfortably, while still having enough left over for a decent life. The day Jake made his final payment to the Galactic Loan Company was one of the happiest days of his life. The 3 Valorians had insisted on celebrating with him at their favorite restaurant, a place that served food from their homeworld. Jake had never tasted anything like Valorian cuisine, but he had learned to appreciate the bold flavors and enormous portions. "Today you are truly free," Commander Zara had said, raising her glass of Valorian fruit wine in a toast. "But more importantly, today you know that you have the strength to stay free." The celebration had continued late into the evening, with the Valorians teaching Jake traditional victory songs from their culture. The songs were beautiful and powerful, filled with harmonies that seemed to make the walls of the restaurant vibrate. Other diners had initially stared at the unusual group, but by the end of the evening, several tables were singing along with them. Jake had also discovered that his experience with the Valorians had given him something valuable to offer others. He had started volunteering at a financial counseling center, helping people who were struggling with debt problems similar to his own. His story of transformation and the practical knowledge he had gained were inspiring to others who felt hopeless about their situations. "You understand what it's like," one young woman had told him after he had helped her negotiate a payment plan with her creditors. "Most financial advisors have never been where we are. They give good advice, but you know what it feels like to be scared and desperate." The work was rewarding, but Jake knew that his time with the Valorians was coming to an end. Their ship repairs were nearly complete, and they would soon be returning to active duty with the peacekeeping force. The thought of saying goodbye to them was difficult, but Jake knew he was ready to continue his new life independently. On their last evening together, the 4 of them sat in the quarters where Jake had once hidden in terror. They shared a final meal and talked about their plans for the future. Jake would continue his job with the logistics department and his volunteer work at the counseling center. The Valorians would return to their duties protecting innocent people throughout the galaxy. "You have become a different person, Lieutenant," Vera observed. "When we first found you, you were controlled by fear. Now you control your own destiny." "The scared young man who hid in our laundry is gone," Sergeant Kaya added with a smile. "In his place is someone we are proud to call our friend." Commander Zara stood and placed her massive hand on Jake's shoulder. "You have learned the most important lesson any person can learn. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best opportunities. Your debt crisis brought you to us, and working together has made all of us stronger." Jake looked around at the 3 incredible beings who had saved his life in every way that mattered. "I can never repay you for what you've done for me," he said. "You already have," Commander Zara replied. "You worked hard, you kept your promises, and you proved that humans and Valorians can be true friends. That is payment enough." As Jake prepared for bed that final night, he reflected on the amazing journey that had brought him to this point. 8 months ago, he had been a failure running from his problems. Now he was a success, ready to face whatever challenges life might bring. The Reapers never did find him in that laundry facility, but more importantly, Jake had found something he never expected. He had found the strength to become the person he was always meant to be.